And yeah, I think we're live. Had a little bit of an issue. Hopefully it's resolved. I think we're good. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know there's people kind of all around the world listening to this. I got a couple people in Australia in the group. So wherever you are, hope you're having a great Thursday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever it is where you are. Anyway, let's get into it. So today we're actually going to hop on for a little quick training, a quickie. So we're gonna have a little quickie here today. Fast 15, which is basically my guide to losing 15 pounds fast. So this is using the RX method to lose fat and build muscle, which is basically the same method that I use to coach my personal clients. It's a little bit of a simplified version, and the reason I'm bringing it to you in a simplified version is not because I think you guys wouldn't understand or anything like that. There's no crazy new knowledge here. The reason that I want it to be simple is because I think as CrossFitters we get a little bit excited by shiny things, by new things, by expensive things, nice looking things, and basically anything that's just complex, new, nice. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in that, and we lose sight of the basics. So I really like to kind of bring it to the simple stuff, to bring it back to the foundation, to bring it back to the basics, because I really believe that when it comes to nutrition, anything like that, bring it to the basics and doing the basics well, I think is going to take you much further than trying to focus on the minutia of success. So a good example of that is, I get a lot of questions about things like nutrition timing. When should I take my carbs? For taking protein after a workout, all these kinds of things. And don't get me wrong, those kind of things can be important. But I think if you don't have the basics nailed down, getting into something like nutrition timing, it's like, whoa. Let's dial it back here and make sure that we're doing the right things first before we get into something that's a little bit more complex like nutrition timing. I liken it kind of to mowing the lawn with your house on fire. Of course you want to mow the lawn, make sure it's nice. People are driving by going like, hey man, that dude has a fucking nice lawn, but his house is on fire. You know what I mean? It's just, let's deal with the house on fire first. Let's call the fire department before we start doing lawn maintenance. Anyway, I'm done rambling. Let's jump into it and talk about the Fast 15. So let's talk about ways we can shred fat fast. First off, we have to talk about what's considered fast. So what are the expectations for us here? I personally consider fast about 1 pound a week. You'll see diets out there that kind of, can get people to lose weight fairly quickly. A lot of that ends up being water weight. What you kind of see with keto, low carb, because carbohydrates do have hydrates in them, which is important for losing weight. It's just water. But anyway, besides that point, what's considered fast? I would say between 1 to 2 pounds a week is considered fast and reasonable. Anything more than that, I think, is a little bit too extreme. So I think if you're in the 1.5 kind of range, then I would consider that fast. So losing 15 pounds, assuming that you have it to lose. Again, if you're already at 15% body fat, we might not be able to hit those numbers because it's going to be a little bit harder to lose that low percent body fat and get it down to an even lower percent body fat. But if you do have it to lose, then it can be done easily in 12 to 15 weeks at about 1 to 1.5 pounds per week. And again, assuming that we don't run into any hiccups, like you don't get knocked out with COVID or something like that. Anyway, so this helps us get to a place where we can actually look like we work out, okay? So that's kind of why I do this, to make people, to help people get lean, to help people get healthy, so they can perform, recover faster, do better in their workouts, be healthier, and just tear shit up in the gym, at home, at work, all of it at the same time. So let's get into it. Number 1 is move more. That is no surprise. I think, any coach out there, if someone asks them, give me 3 or 4 points on how to lose weight and get healthier, one of those 4 or 5 points is going to be moving more. So the more we move, the higher our energy needs will be. The higher, and the more fuel we need, the easier it is to be in a caloric deficit. So if you're, a person that eats around 1,000 calories, if you're not losing weight there, it's almost impossible to restrict any further and be healthy. You know what I mean? You're going to start to get into like a starvation mode, and it's just not possible to get any further. So if you were a sedentary person eating 1,000 calories, if it were me, I'd ask you to let's stop being sedentary. Let's build our energy up. So by expending more energy, the more energy we expend, the more we can take in, the easier it is to be in a caloric deficit. Does that make sense? So I'd rather, even if you were to be at maintenance, I'd rather you be at maintenance at 2,000 calories per day than at 1,000 calories a day, regardless if you're losing weight or not. Just because having the higher energy levels is always better for everybody. So the bottom line is walk 30 to 60 minutes a day. Walk maybe 2 to 4 kilometers a day, or walk 10K steps. I think 10K steps is probably the most common referred to metric when it comes to movement. That's because it kind of takes in your entire day. But sometimes it can be difficult to get the steps over the day if you're working from home, if you're working a desk job. So I really like to kind of frame it into different metrics, like 10K steps, or hey, just go for a 2-kilometer walk, or go for 30 minutes. Sometimes I'm a very slow walker. So if you ask me to walk like 2 kilometers, it probably would take me, closer to 30 minutes, which more for some, it would probably be, 20 minutes maybe. But I personally just stick to the 30 minutes. That is kind of what I do every day. And if I'm not working out, then I'll try to hit a 60-minute workout. Just making sure that we're expending energy, burning calories consistently every single day. That's the goal. Second, no one is ever a fan of this one, and it's fucking hard. No more social media. Social media can be such a burden on our lives. I hear so many people come to me saying, Steve, I don't have time to meal prep. I don't have time to hit more than 4 watts a week. I don't have time to go to sleep earlier. I'm absolutely blocked. And then I always say, okay, well, if you're that busy, show me your screen time this week. And it's, no, I don't do it that much. Send me a screenshot of your screen time and tell me that you don't have time. Of course, that's not everybody. There's going to be some people watching this who are like, no, I actually don't have time, and I don't even use my phone that much. Of course, you probably are the exception. But point being, there are people out there that think they don't have time, when in reality, we have no idea how much time we have in a day until we start getting rid of social media. So I'm kind of being facetious a little bit, and I don't want anyone to absolutely get rid of social media. I think it's a very powerful tool. I like it. This is where I'm streaming this right now, is on Facebook. So I do think it plays an important role, but I think it's a really good idea to reduce our social media intake. So, if you're using social media on average, 4 or 5 hours a day, it's like, hey, let's dial it back to 3. So I think the biggest thing that it can be a little bit dangerous around is food. So it's the biggest distractor ever. And I think, not to get too much ahead of the game here and talk about nutrition, but how social media kind of ruins nutrition is that we're always on our phone, right? So even if you're eating, just chilling, you're probably on your phone scrolling, and before you know it, the food is over. You're done your meal, and you don't even realize, maybe you're not even satiated. You're like, that was just kind of a fucking shitty meal because I didn't even really take it in or enjoy it or anything. I actually was listening to this book called The Expectation Effect, and they talked about this really cool study of basically memory loss and food. And they kind of, I don't want to go too deep into it, but basically likened like distracted eating or eating while you're distracted with like technology is actually very similar to someone that eats when they have a head trauma and they can't remember, or they can't like form new memories, and that you could feed them and then feed them again, and their body doesn't even register that they just ate because they don't have memory of eating. So that kind of really makes sense to me when I think about snacking, right? So if you're snacking while you're watching Netflix, snacking while you're scrolling social media, you're not going to be even remembering how much you ate or anything like that. And there was actually a study to be paired with that where they actually were able to reduce the caloric intake on average of people who were kind of forced or asked to think about the food they ate that day, and they found a link between like the more that people thought about the food that they ate that day and remembered it, the less that they were hungry or wanted to eat throughout the day. And it was a pretty cool study. Anyway, definitely check out the book if you want. There's a lot of cool stuff on nutrition. It's the expectation effect. Anyway, to get back into it, so use screen time each day or week as a guide. So try to get like 10% down per week if you can. The more reduce social media, the better. Less social media will free up time to do productive things or things you enjoy. So I mean, I'm sure all of us at one point have been in bed scrolling through TikTok, scrolling through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, and we don't really get anything out of it. Sometimes you'll find something funny, you'll chuckle to yourself or you'll share with your partner, but I think ultimately there's nothing about it that's intrinsically nice or make you feel good. So I think if we were free up time, we can do things like reading, having good conversations with our family, our partners, possibly doing other things that we should be doing and we know that we have to do but have been putting off. I know there's a lot of things that I can do late at night that aren't scrolling through social media, and I try to reduce that because I know I have these other things to do. Anyway, I think the action for this ultimately is to take a step to reduce social media. So the one that I always go with is like, hey, okay, you like TikTok? Cool. We can have TikTok, we can have Facebook, all these things, but let's take it off the home screen. Let's not make a shortcut for this at all. We'll have it on our phone. If you want to go, scroll through TikTok, you can, but we want to get rid of that impulse of just opening up your phone and pressing that button to open that app. Put it away in the background, so you actually have to go through your app library and select it. And yeah, I think that's probably the best thing to reduce the impulse, but at least you still have it. It's kind of like, putting the cookie jar on top of the fridge or something like that. It's like, hey, you can have the cookies, just let's not put it on the countertop so you can take it every time. The next one is drink 2 to 3 liters of water. So just staying hydrated can have so many benefits. It's linked to a vast majority of metabolic function. Basically everything in our body runs on water. Of course, it doesn't give us energy, but everything is kind of transported with water. And it'll make you fuller and reduce overconsumption. So this is nothing new. Everyone knows that water is good for you, and you should be drinking water as much as you can. I suggest 2 to 3 liters a day. Obviously, it can depend on where you're from. If you're down in Texas and it's hot as fucking shit, then maybe you need a little bit more, especially if you're maybe like a bigger person, like a 6'2", 250-pound guy. You probably need a little bit more water. You're probably sweating more. You have bigger muscles, all that kind of stuff. Whereas if you're like a 4'9", 110-pound lady, you probably don't need as much. But I think 2 to 3 liters is a safe bet to make for most people. Adjust if it's too much, but if it's too little, you can add a little bit more as well. So the action for this is just to buy a 1 liter or 35-ounce bottle. Fill that shit 3 times a day. Personally, I will try to make sure that I clear that bottle once before noon, once in the afternoon, and then once in the evening as well to hit my 3 liters. There's actually a pro tip that I'm not going to include in the physical part of this training. This is just going to be a little tip for the people watching live. And I this fun fact that I learned that I fought tooth and nail for because I didn't believe it. And I challenged a friend of mine saying that, no, it's not true. It's not true. Because he told me that a nutritionist friend of his said that, his coffee intake counts towards his water. And I was like, no, there's no way. That's bullshit. Like, no, you should be drinking. He's like, nope, it's the truth. Anyway, so I did a whole bunch of research trying to find, and apparently, yeah, if you're an avid coffee drinker and you're drinking your normal amount of coffee, it actually counts towards your fluid intake for the day. That being said, if you don't drink coffee and then want to start drinking like 3 or 4 cups a day, it doesn't count because your body's just not used to it. Anyway, point being is that, coffee kind of does count towards your water/fluid intake. I still think we should get 3 liters of water, but I think it was just like a fun thing that, I was real dogged against it. I'm like, I don't believe it, but it's true. Anyway, so the next one is sleep 7 to 9 hours. That's our third point for today. I'm so big on sleep, and you probably, if you've been in the group for any amount of time, you're like, here he fucking goes about sleep again. But I literally can't stop talking about it because I think it's hands down the best thing that we can do for recovery, for weight loss, for muscle gain, for mental clarity, for reducing stress, and all those things together are going to help each other. So I really believe that sleep is the actual secret. It's not a secret, but it feels like a secret because everyone ignores it, myself included. I got up early as shit this morning, but anyway, I really want to harp on sleep. And if you could take anything away from this training, I want you to think about sleep and what you can do to help it. So sleep is key for getting lean, building muscle, being productive, and recovering in a WOD. So you can improve the quality by following a sleep routine. So sleep routines can be a little bit tough because it means it has to be a routine. You have to do it actually consistently and every night. It's easy to get away from the routine because I'm sure, we all kind of live chaotic lives, and it's always a little bit different every night. Sometimes you go to bed early, sometimes you go to bed late, depending, you got kids to put to bed that don't want to be put to bed. You have a partner that's coming in late. Maybe you miss supper and you're hungry, so you have to, have a meal. All these kind of factors play in. But I think the more that we can stick to a sleep routine, the better it is for all of us. And I always hate saying this, but you're not special either when it comes to sleep. A lot of people think like, hey, I got my 5 hours, I'm good, that's all I need. And bullshit. No one's special when it comes to sleep. There is a very small percentage of the population that have a genetic factor that leads to them being able to function at a high level on 3 to 4 hours of sleep. But everyone says they are, so that I feel like they think that they're 90% of the population have this gene, but it's not true. Everyone needs sleep. Just because you think you can function doesn't mean that you're actually operating at a high capacity. So do your best to get the quantity of sleep that you can. If you're limited on quantity, because hey, I get it, life can be fucking chaotic. You got shit coming down the pipeline that you got to deal with. You got to stay up late. You got to get up early. You just got to get it done some days. But I still want you to prioritize it. So on those days where that's not happening, instead of staying up and watching 3 to 4 episodes of fucking Grey's Anatomy and staying up too late, go to bed. You're gonna thank yourself for it. You'll be more productive the next day. Just take care of it. The action to take away for this one though is start dialing your bedtime back 30 minutes every single week. So if you're going to bed now at 11:30 midnight, let's aim for like 11 for the next week, then 10:30 for the next week after that, then 10 for the week after that. And slowly but surely you can start moving your bedtime back. It's really hard to go from like, hey, you're falling asleep at midnight, 1 a.m. and let's go to bed at 8. That's nearly impossible to do. So just start dialing it back. And also if you made it this far in the training and want to get a copy of my hypersleep checklist, I actually just released that last week, and it has 3 tiers. One for beginner, one for immediate, one for advanced. So get your hands on a copy of that, and they'll help you dial in the quality of your sleep. That way you're not just chasing the quantity, but also maximizing the quality even when quantity is low. So you might be asking, like, what the fuck? We're, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. I said this was going to be a quickie. This is not a quickie. I'm sorry if I had a nickel every time I heard that, right? We haven't talked about nutrition yet. I might have alluded to it a little bit, but, we're 3 or 4 points in. I haven't actually talked about nutrition, which is funny because I think that really goes in line with my beliefs, in that when it comes to nutrition, it's not usually, the knowledge about nutrition that people struggle with. It's just finding ways to stay accountable and to find processes in their day to make sure that, it makes it easier to do the nutrition. It's not usually like, hey, what do I eat and what quantities? That knowledge is usually pretty there, but it's almost everything else. And I think some of the things I've talked about already are actually unintentionally things that are going to help you dial in your nutrition. I think they all kind of go together. But so we will talk about nutrition, okay? I promise that is the next one. So let's talk about it. I want to make this super simple. Like I said at the beginning, it's easy to overcomplicate nutrition and think about all the hard things that we have to do when it comes to nutrition. But I think we should just boil it down and make it as simple as possible. In addition to all the other things that we're doing, like dialing in our sleep, getting rid of social media, moving more, it's going to make it very easy to start shedding body fat. So what I want you to do is eat whole foods and track your energy intake. So whole foods, because we need to have nutrient dense, natural foods that are going to fuel our WODs and our bodies and keep us away from processed shit. Seed oils, refined sugars, all that, basically, anything you get at Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, A&W, whatever. We want to stay away from that stuff and instead have whole foods, okay? So a whole food, it's really hard to kind of describe a whole food. I feel like it kind of operates on a continuum. You have very whole foods over here and then very processed foods over here. A whole food, basically, the closer we get to that extreme on the continuum, it's basically like pulling it out of the ground in your backyard. That's about as whole food as you can get. Obviously, that's not really realistic. I usually like to take the example of a potato. But, of course, before I get into that, we have the other extreme too, which is highly processed shit, which is basically gummy bears, right? There's not really a whole lot in there that's natural. There might be a little bit, but it's mostly just, fake stuff that's made in the lab. So we have one extreme very processed, one extreme very whole. Potato can fall very wildly on that scale. You can pull a potato out of the ground, take a bite out of it. That's very whole, probably not appetizing, but it's whole. But then you just add steps of processing and it starts becoming other things, right? So you can cut that in half, have a baked potato, becomes a little less whole, but more towards processed, but it tastes fucking good. Then you can chop it up very thinly or in wedges and, put sprinkle some salt on it and make your own potato wedges. Sounds pretty good. A little bit more processed, but that's okay. But then we can kind of keep doing that until we have like potato chips. You know what I mean? Not like your own potato chips, but I'm talking about like, Lay's potato chips. That's pretty far down the continuum. So we really want to focus on the whole end of the continuum and try to get as close to non-processed or stay far away from processed as we can. In addition to this, we also want to track our food through macros, or I'm going to offer a secondary solution, is going to be taking a picture of everything you eat. So the thing I find that's kind of in common with these two things, macros are great. I ask my clients to count macros and things like that. They're very powerful, really good at getting from like point A to point B, like losing 15 pounds. There's that can also be achieved when you're not counting macros. Let me explain. So when you count macros, you're basically putting, pylons or borders around the food you're eating, right? So if you're going to track something, you're tracking what you're going to eat, not those little things that you're going to snack on or graze on while you're eating. So, excuse me. So when you're counting, you're naturally putting pylons around those things. So you're going to stop the unnecessary snacking. You're going to automatically do portion control because you have to count the portion. So if you take a picture of your food, you're kind of doing the same thing. So if I ask you to take a picture of everything that you ate tomorrow, and I want you to send it to me, what you're going to do, okay? I don't even say that you have to, let's say you can eat processed food, whatever. You can eat whatever you want. Just send me a picture of what you're eating, or like how much you're eating, exactly how much. If you're going to start eating something like out of a bag of potato chips, what happens when you typically eat out of a bag of potato chips? You go sit down on the couch with the fucking shit in your hand, and you put your hand in, and you eat it until the bag's gone, right? That's typically what happens. If I ask you to take a picture and send it to me, you're not going to just take a selfie of you eating and send it to me. No, you're going to take the chips, put it in a bowl, and then take a picture. So just by doing that action, you've already put pylons and borders around your consuming of that food, right? So you've already done the portion control, which is that any different than macros? The only difference is with macros, we know the exact quantities. But with the picture, we're stopping those snackings and all those things. So like, if you had to take a picture every time you passed by the cookie jar and had a cookie, you'd be like, oh, fuck, I don't want to take a picture. It's too much work, right? It's really easy to just shove a cookie in your mouth. when you start doing that, those little behaviors start getting corralled, and that's why it can be so powerful. So that's why I actually suggest, yeah, you can track macros, but you can also just take a picture of everything. Excuse me now. So the next tip, I kind of give like a pro level tip. Eat mindfully, slowly, and without distraction. So we talked about the social media aside, and to not use social media while you're eating, because it is terribly distracting. And when you're distracted while you're eating, you're basically not even knowing that you're eating. You're completely out of touch with the food that's going into your body, and you just ate and you don't even remember it. So definitely don't have any distractions. And I will actually tell you to slow down. Take a deep breath, relax, try to, to slow down. There's a lot of things you can do. You can take deep breaths in between, 1 or 2 breaths between each bite. You can put your fork down. So when you shovel food into your mouth, put the fork down. Make sure you chew it entirely before you pick the fork back up and go for your next bite. You can always do things like take a sip of water. So put your fork down, take a sip of water. All those things help us slow down and be a little bit more mindful when we're eating. And to be mindful with your food, you have to be really present, right? So if we're not distracted by Netflix, on our phones, things like that, you're already way ahead of the game. It's gonna be much easier. You probably don't even know it. Like, who eats in silence alone, right? It's kind of weird. But I promise you, it'll be super powerful, and you'll feel way more satiated. You'll be more in touch with your hormones and what's going on in your body and how you're eating. I promise you, it'll be a game changer. So definitely work on that. The last point here is no mention of caloric deficit. I haven't talked about caloric deficit. All I've talked about is tracking, right? So to dial it back kind of to macros again, just like my example with the food journaling, when it comes to tracking macros, usually just when you start tracking, you start, reeling in all those little negative behaviors that add up over the day. The little snack here, the one beer here, I didn't see you eat all that fucking chocolate there. All those kinds of things just get stopped, and that's usually enough to get people to start losing weight. So that's why sometimes when it comes to this, I don't even talk about a caloric deficit, because if we just start tracking, we start understanding what we're eating and we know the problems. Sometimes we don't need people to tell us our problems. We fucking know them. So that's usually enough, and that's usually what I go by. So the action here would be take a picture of your food or track before you start. The key is before you start. Okay, you have to do it before you start eating. Because if you intend to do it after you're eating, you'll be like, I don't really have to. It's already gone. I don't know what it was. I don't remember what it was. And then you're no further ahead. So put away your phone and eat without distraction, and stay away from the drive-thru. So again, staying away from those processed foods. Okay. So that's it. So I'll just take you guys through a short recap to make sure that we covered everything that I hope to have covered, and that's it. So we talked about moving more first. Make sure that we're getting 10K steps, 2 to 4 kilometers, and 30 to 60 minutes of walking a day. You can do that through actively walking, or just maybe if you have like a high movement job and you don't really need to do more walking, then that's cool too. No more social. So getting rid of social media and reducing it as much as possible. Drink 2 to 3 liters of water. Liters. I apparently need more water right now. So drink 2 to 3 liters of water per day. It's going to help you feel more full, more hydrated for your workouts and your WODs. So that's a good thing. Sleep 7 to 9 hours. Again, to dial back to the sleep and how important it is. If you can take anything away from this training, it's the sleep. If you want a copy of my hypersleep checklist, just DM me and I'll fucking send it to you. It is very helpful, and I've heard a lot of good things about it from people who have looked at it. And lastly, the only thing that we talked about when it comes to nutrition is eating whole foods and tracking your intake. And like we just discussed, we don't even have to talk about being in a caloric deficit, because usually just the habits that we get rid of by being more in tune with our food and what we're eating usually get us to a point. Now, of course, if you're lower on the end of body fat percentage, you might have to be intentional about being in a caloric deficit, and that'll be like the next step. But with the whole intention of keeping this today simple, just tracking the intake and eating whole foods is usually enough to get us in the right direction. So if you can do those 5 things, And I think if you did them correctly and consistently, then 3 months you'd actually be totally amazed where you could be. Not only will you probably look better, you'll feel better, you'll perform better, you'll get a big jump in, doing those gymnastics movements better. You'll be faster, you'll be fitter, and you'll be happier. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. Feel free to leave a comment below with how you felt about the training. Maybe if there was something specific that spoke to you, or maybe something you learned. I would love to hear your feedback. And likewise, if there's anything that you missed and you say, hey Steve, you fucking missed this giant fucking thing that I think is very important. How could you be so stupid to miss it? Let me know. And I'll make sure that on the next one, I'll catch it. So would love to hear your feedback. Anyway, guys, I hope that this was super valuable for you. Let me know what you thought about the training, and we'll catch you on